everyone, I'm Juan Fernandez.
And I'm Sharon Tay. President Trump is feeling the heat tonight on two major fronts.
That's right, the president under fire from Democrats in Congress and the courts, and he's lashing out at both. KCAL 9 political reporter Dave Bryan has the very latest for us. Dave?
Juan and Sharon, on a day when President Trump was scheduled to meet with Democrats about working together on replacing the country's crumbling infrastructure, an angry President Trump stormed out of the meeting just minutes after it began. It was a cover-up comment from Speaker Nancy Pelosi Wednesday that fueled the president's anger.
What they've done is abuse.
On one of the more difficult days of his presidency, Donald Trump seemed to be under fire from every direction. Walking out of a planned White House meeting with Democratic congressional leaders on infrastructure after only about 3 minutes because he was angry about statements made by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi earlier in the day. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer watched the walkout.
To watch what happened in the White House would make your jaw drop.
CBS News reports during his brief moments at the meeting, President Trump didn't shake hands or sit down. He accused Pelosi of saying something terrible about him and left.
He just took a pass, and it just makes me wonder why he did that.
This is what infuriated the president.
And we believe that the President of the United States is engaged in a cover-up.
Pelosi was referring to the president's push to keep his financial records secret and keep his former White House counsel from testifying. In other words, demanding an end to the growing number of investigations of the president and his administration by House committees run by Democrats.
Instead of walking in happily into a meeting, I walk in to look at people that had just said that I was doing a cover-up. I don't do cover-ups.
What it really shows is that the president is a petulant child, but the president is simply going to stonewall everything because we're conducting oversight that's unconstitutional and unprecedented.
Burbank Congressman Adam Schiff says another court setback for President Trump involving his financial records may have fueled the president's anger.
Look, he's probably rattled by what he's seeing as the courts are moving against him. As whistleblower accounts of suspicious activity at Deutsche Bank involving he and his son-in-law come forward, I can certainly understand why all of this would greatly concern him. But he needs to stop whining and do his job.
Republicans charge the never-ending stream of investigations of President Trump, aiming in many cases at issues that have already been resolved by the special counsel, would be enough to anger any president. President Trump has indicated he won't work with the Democrats until the wave of investigations is over, as the escalating conflict between the two branches of government could grind the government to a halt.
It is a back and forth between a legislative branch which has powers and wants information and an executive branch which also has powers and has the right to protect some of what it does.
Now, in fact, President Trump actually suffered two Wednesday setbacks on financial records issues. We mentioned that a federal judge in Manhattan denied a request from President Trump to block the Deutsche Bank from handing over his financial records to a congressional committee. And the New York Times reports that state lawmakers in Albany, New York, passed a bill that would allow Congress to gain access to President Trump's state tax returns as well. So, Sharon, a tough day for President Trump.
Indeed, Dave, thank you.